That's okay, you'll just have two recordings.
Yeah.
All right, so we talked about the study and then the purification, and as we said, for this self-observation is important. Developing that attitude of being aware of our thoughts, our emotions, our motivations. So in an article that Blavatsky wrote about a spiritual aspirant that goes to a teacher, this is probably kind of a metaphor or not a real story, but she's talking about the principles that an ideal teacher teaches the disciple. So she says, so the disciple comes and visits the spiritual teacher, expecting the teacher to tell him how to go into high planes of spirituality. And then he's shocked when the student finds that all his attention and watchfulness are required on the outer plane. He must never forget himself, never lose hold over his body, his mind, his brain. Like the first thing that the teacher teaches him is to be even more aware of the physical plane and your body and your movements and the little things that we want to escape from, spiritually speaking. But he's disappointed that no, now you have to be even more aware of this. And then she continues, he must even learn to control the expression of every feature, to check the action of every muscle, each muscle, to be master of every slightest involuntary movement. The daily life around and within him is pointed out as the object of his study and observation. So you see the idea here. Okay, part of the spiritual path is to develop mindfulness, awareness. And again, she was writing this in the 1800s. To begin to be aware of, your bodies, your thoughts, your emotions, things around you, because this is the foundation for spiritual work. Without this, it's difficult to do any inner work. So then, in another place, she wrote, it is absolutely essential that the superficial and inattentive habits of thought engendered by Western civilization shall be given up. This was way before TikTok and YouTube. Again, late 1800s. I don't know what she would say about today.
She would shrink.
To this end, students are required to practice the habit of careful and constant concentration of mind upon every duty and act in life they may have to do. So again, the idea of mindfulness. She taught meditation, as we are going to see, but the foundation for that is paying attention during the day. And Besant would say later, how can we expect to be able to focus in meditation during that half an hour if the rest of the day we are distracted? I mean, we are constantly, not paying attention. You can't concentrate in that half an hour, whatever your meditation is. So this is part of that foundation. Of course, we can be alert 24/7, but the idea is to develop some more of this mindfulness and choose specific moments in the day where it's your yoga time. Not yoga of postures, that's also good, but this is when you are going to do things especially mindful, like walking your dog, or doing the dishes, or doing something that doesn't require a lot of intellectual activity. Michelle always says folding the clothes, that's her yoga, folding the clothes, or cooking, whatever you choose. Start trying to use moments for a special practice of mindfulness, and then that extends in other areas of your life. And then, so for the purification, we need two things. That's self-observation, and also we need what we call willpower, the real willpower. Not, real will is not something that produces inner conflict. The inner conflict happens when two desires oppose each other. The desire to eat cake and the desire to go for a run. And then, they oppose and then they fight, and because they are on the same level, there is inner conflict. True will is something deep. True will is the reason why we are here. I mean, it's something that gradually makes you go in a certain direction that is in tune with your vision, with your spiritual perception. But that will needs to be awake. So let's look at that idea. She says, will is the offspring of the divine, the God in human beings. And desire is the motive power of the biological life, or physical inheritance from the animal kingdom. Most people live in and by desire, mistaking it for will. See, we think, oh, I need will to get up early. Sure, we call that will, but that's another desire, maybe a better desire than just be lazy. Suppose that's the opposite. But it's another form of desire. And because we are dealing desire and desire, they can clash, as I said, and produce inner conflict. So she says, but he who would achieve a spiritual development must separate will from desire, make his will the ruler, for desire is unstable and ever-changing, while the will is steady and constant. So you see, the will is that force that keeps you moving in a certain direction in life. Desire is always changing. Today I want to do this, tomorrow I don't want to do that, or the next second. And so what we are talking about, the real will comes from a higher nature. The more we connect with the higher nature, the more our life is aligned in the direction of the real, which is what we call spirituality. Simply the direction of that goes in the same direction as the cosmos is going, so to say. So she says, the task of the aspirant is twofold. One, to awaken the will, because that kind of will is, slumbering in most of us. So we need to awaken it. To strengthen it by use and contact. So the more we act that will, the more we strengthen it. So that's one part, to make it the absolute ruler within his body, and parallel to this, to purify desire. So we saw that part. So along with the purification, we need to awaken that will. And we awaken that will, as she says, by first we need to perceive it. First we need, we realize there is something deep within that wants to go in this direction. So by acting on that, by giving it expression, is how we strengthen. So of course, to perceive that inner will, we need also self-observation, that introspection. So self-observation and the development of will are like the two wings of purification. Any comments or questions about this before we go to the last point and then the final discussion? In the pamphlet there are more quotes. This is like a summary. Just
So your talk's based on this.
Yes. And there are more quotes and more technical explanation. Because this is a public talk, keeping it more general.
Just out of curiosity, isn't there about 8 billion people on this planet? And then I haven't been impressed with, say, the will of how many people are in the United States of America. But it's interesting because you don't accomplish anything unless you have will, and it depends on what you want to accomplish and to what level you need to accomplish it, and maybe the accomplishment of the direction of the will would possibly uh, inspire other people to also use and develop theirs.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious. I'm not sure how countries vary from one another all the time, but
Yeah.
it's interesting to perceive the karma of different countries and how much will their leaders are using or not using for beneficial purposes.
Now, the way that HPV is using will here is in a higher way. So
yeah.
let's say there are two ways you can accomplish things, by desire or by will. Many people who are highly successful is because they have a strong desire, no will at all from the spiritual point of view. We call that will. That's what Blavatsky was saying, but most people confuse will and desire. Technically speaking, all these people that may be very successful in whatever their field, maybe merely because they have a strong desire and discipline, of course, discipline and other things, but the motive power. Now, the problem is that when the motive power is desire, you can become a destructive person in in an abstract way. I'm saying you can be very successful but cruel or selfish or this or that. So desire can make you the most successful person and also the most destructive person. The difference with will is that because will comes from the higher nature, it wills to go only in the direction that is in harmony with the cosmos. So I would say that very few people in the world use real will, spiritual will. I mean, we all use it to some extent. I think there are many people who use it to some extent. But we are talking about a spiritual principle in this context.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
All right, so let's see the last part, meditation. Again, because the Theosophical Society was the first organization founded in modern times for esotericism. Of course, you had Freemasonry since the 1700s, but by the time that the Theosophical Society was founded, it had become pretty much like a social club and lost a lot of spirituality. But because the TS was part of the reawakening of the esotericism in the West, a lot of the themes that are common today began with the TS. And that's the case of meditation. Meditation was taught first in the West by the Theosophical Society and Blavatsky. We had contemplative orders, they call it prayer. So, of course, there were mystics and in Christianity and Judaism and Islam, but Islam is more regarded Eastern in a certain sense. Anyway, but the idea of meditation, as we know it today, which was obviously known in the East, was brought here to the West by Blavatsky and later Theosophists. Now, the way that the TS taught the practice of meditation from the beginning is different in some important aspects from what we know today about meditation. So let's read first some general statement. She says, the great initiates who have the rare power of throwing themselves into the state of samadhi, this is a Sanskrit word that means absorption, deep concentration. And she says, a state in which one ceases to be the conditioned and personal I and becomes one with the all. These people who can attain that state are the only ones who can boast of having been in contact with the infinite. This was in the context of something else she was saying. But you see, she's saying, when we can reach that state in which we cease to be the conditioned, personal, separate self and become one with the all, we come in contact with the infinite. And she says, this is real theosophy. Theosophy, as you may know, is divine wisdom, Theosophy. So she said, there is the theosophy of the books, which is a secondary theosophy. The real theosophy is the divine wisdom as a state of consciousness. She says in this article, the beacon of the unknown, I think is the article. You have the reference there in the pamphlet. So anyway, here the idea is that what we seek in meditation is not in this kind of transcendental meditation. It's not just to release stress, which is great, but it's not enough. It's not to feel good, which also can help you in your emotional, if you are stressed, and it's good to feel good, but it's not enough. It's not to develop the power of focus in your mind or increase your productivity or your memory. I mean, meditation can do all of that. It's not about developing psychic powers, which again, meditation can do that. The purpose of meditation from the beginning in the Theosophical tradition was to produce this, to bring a realization of your spiritual nature, which is one with the divine. And when you see the techniques of meditation recommended in Theosophical literature, they are all aiming at that. Now, in order to be able to reach this, we need obviously a discipline that involves all the previous practices that we described. Study and the purification, self-observation, the self-mastery and the will. And remember that the motive for all of this is to bring enlightenment to the whole of humanity, because we are not separate. We cannot do it only for ourselves. That's the service part in Theosophy. Now, Blavatsky said an experience that probably if any of us who try to meditate experience, she says, when we calmly sit for any sort of meditation, one of the first things to happen is that the elementals begin to present to our inner eyes pictures of all sorts. The concept of elemental in Theosophical literature is that our bodies, physical, emotional, mental, they have its own automatic life. They are alive. They are not inert vehicles. And when we sit, that life rebels. Typical, we are all fine. Now, the moment we say, okay, let us meditate, we start coughing, we start itching, the elementals, they feed from our identification. When I'm identified with my body, my sensations, with my emotions, with my thoughts, there's a connection between our own consciousness and them, and the energy of our consciousness is feeding them. The moment we start, untangling that, they feel it. Blavatsky says the consciousness of the elementals is a very elemental. That's why she calls them like that, consciousness. Very basic, kind of instinctive. They don't understand that we are a being, an entity. They are just living, like bacteria in us, for example. They are not physical. They are a form of consciousness. But they instinctively feel that when we separate from them, they feel a kind of life is getting out of them, and then they react to try to retain our consciousness entangled with them. So that's how they react, by making our body or our emotions or our thoughts restless, and bring our attention back to them. So she says, present to our inner eyes pictures of all sorts, and the kind of picture presented will be the result of the prior thoughts and also of the state we are in, both mentally and physically. So for this reason, the Theosophical tradition is recommended often, try to meditate in the morning when your mind has not been already caught in some things during the day. Now, some people, in the morning, either they are not in a good mood. Some people wake up in a good mood, or you may be sleepy in the morning. So you have freedom to choose the best day. But if you can do it in the morning, chances are that your mind is going to be less entangled. Anyway, then she says, for if we are disturbed or harassed in any way in thought, the pictures will be more and more confused. In fact, though sometimes having no appearance on the surface of being in confusion. So, sometimes there is this background thinking that is going on and that is hard to focus on something else. Now, this is perfectly normal, just in the same way that we train our pets or a horse, or we need to train our elementals to be okay with us meditate. And it may take some years. Some people, and there can be all kinds of ways in which the elemental is trying to bring you back. Some people, when they start getting into a deeper state, they feel fear. There is a fear that comes in meditation, and that's the emotional elemental trying to bring you back. So you have to be aware of these things so that you can recognize them and gently say, "Not now," or thoughts. Oh, did I turn the light off, or did I do that, or the grocery list come to your mind. So you say, "Not now, later." Now, in connection to the common idea that meditation is just quieting the mind, Blavatsky said to sit for yoga. She's using, at the time there was this practice among mediums that was to sit for development, they call it. Sit for development. So they would sit, leave their minds blank, and let all kinds of influences come to them. Now, Blavatsky herself, when she was young, she was kind of mediumistic like this, but she said that is not the best development. The best development is the occult development, what she called. Again, she was the first person to use the word occult in English. This word had been used in French by Eliphas Levi, for example. So she's the first one in using it in English, and the way she used it is different from the normal way today. By occult, she meant this deeper kind of discipline that is based on the hidden aspect of our nature. Occult means hidden. So, when you do a meditation to feel good, that is not hidden. We know what we are trying to do, or to release stress, or to improve your concentration. That's all based on the aspect of ourselves that is visible to us. An occult meditation, in the way that Blavatsky used that word originally, is a meditation that is trying to develop the inner nature that we can't perceive. It's working for the hidden aspect in us. In any case, so she would say that it's not good to have that kind of nature in which you are helplessly open to external influence. There is a difference between mediumship and theurgy. Theurgy, like for example, Iamblichos, the Neoplatonists we talk about, these were people who raised their consciousness and they could be in touch with angels or the daemons, as they call them, not demons. Daemons were spiritual entities. But they were the ones that were driving the car, let's say. A medium is in the back seat, and many times they are completely unconscious. It depends. But in any case, so using that idea of sit for development, she says, to sit for yoga, to have the same attitude. Okay, I'm going to meditate. I sit and I just clear my mind. She said, to sit for yoga with only a superficial and often distorted knowledge of the real practice is almost invariably fatal. For 10 to 1, the student will either develop mediumistic powers in himself or lose time and get disgusted both with practice and theory. So, for example, she says the effort however, should be continually made to center the consciousness in the heart and to listen for the promptings of the spiritual consciousness. She gave a few techniques. Some are more technical and obscure and difficult. But one of the techniques she recommended, bring your consciousness to your heart, because there is a spiritual center, not the physical heart, but there is a spiritual center in the area of the heart, which is connected to your spiritual consciousness. So basically, the theosophical approach is first raise your consciousness to your inner self, to your spiritual consciousness, say. Raise the seat of your consciousness to the spiritual, and only then go into silence. If you start by clearing your mind, you are in your personal nature. You are like at this point in evolution, our seat of consciousness naturally is on the astral level, the astral plane. We are in the fourth round, for those who know these concepts. Therefore, the principle that we are developing right now is the fourth principle, which is the astral, the emotional. So if we sit and we just clear our minds, we become receptive to all the energies that we don't want to be receptive to. The astral plane is where the anger, intolerance, sadness, all that is there. So the idea in meditation is you first work actively with your thoughts or your emotions, if you are more on the devotional path. You work with a technique where you raise your consciousness, and only then you try to enter into a state of quietness in that spiritual atmosphere that you create. If you think that meditation is just clearing your mind, then you will develop either this mediumistic tendency where you are going to be affected by all kinds of influences, or it will be just useless from a spiritual point of view. And then she talked a lot about the heart, and then she said the student will now begin to understand why so much stress is laid on the heart in connection with meditation, and why so many allusions are made in all Hindu literature to the Purusha, the spirit in the heart. You have meditations in the heart in Hinduism, in Tibetan Buddhism, in Islam, the Dhikr, in Russian Christian, Christianity, let's say, you have the Jesus prayer in the heart developed. Everywhere you have this idea of meditating in the heart. Now, remember, it's not the physical heart. If you pay attention to the physical heart, you can interfere in the workings of the organ. Actually, in this, if any of you read the Diary of a Russian Pilgrim, where this technique of repeating the Jesus prayer in the heart, this monk did that, and he would focus in the heart. And he did have that, he says in his diary, he was experimenting, going from town to town. And the heart did, alter its function, and sometimes not in a good way. So if you do that, imagine like a golden center there, and you are in a spiritual center in the heart, in the region of the heart, around where the physical heart is, but don't visualize the physical heart, just visualize like a golden center. And then, of course, the idea, you can use mantras like the Om, the word O, Aum, or Om, if pronounced by an averagely good person in the correct way. She talked quite a bit how to pronounce the Om for different purposes. It will strengthen that person morally, especially if between two Oms, he meditates intently on the Om within him, which is our higher nature, concentrating all his attention upon the ineffable glory of our higher nature. Again, the Theosophical tradition never recommended mechanical techniques, the typical japa in India. You just repeat the mantra one after the other. That tends to produce a state of hypnotism. Even Patanjali, the father of yoga, when he talks about meditating on the Om, he says, repeat the Om and meditate on the meaning, which is exactly what Blavatsky is saying here. But the idea in the Theosophical tradition, because this is a very powerful word, sound, it will increase whatever is within you. So Blavatsky says, do not chant the Om when you are not in a meditative state of consciousness. You see, today they say Om everywhere. Well, according to Blavatsky, that that will increase whatever is happening in you. So if you have attachments, that will increase your attachments. If you have this or that. Fortunately, most people don't have enough concentration and power to produce anything good or bad. That's a protection. But as we increase our ability to focus and our will and our concentration, then you start having power. And the power can go both ways. So Blavatsky always said, use the Om as a sacred word to be used in a sacred space, either in a group or personally, but when it is in the context of sacred space. All right, so that's all. I don't know if there was something else. There are other techniques again that I put in they are in the pamphlet, but they are more elaborate. You want to bring that. So any comments or questions?
I have a question from a person on our Zoom call.
All right.
From Laura. I'm getting to you, Laura. She asked, can you clarify how seeking knowledge and love are, in quote, selfishness after all?
It all depends on the motivation. Now, Blavatsky recognizes a kind of progression. So I remember I came to the TS not to serve humanity. I came to the TS to learn for myself and to learn how to deal with life and to gain enlightenment. And that's a better pursuit from a spiritual point of view than just accumulating stuff. So the seeking for knowledge or seeking for love, in the sense that, again, real love is about giving. When we have these great people that are expressions of love, like the Buddha or Jesus or people like them, and they were not seeking anything for themselves because they had found the fullness that is in all of us. When you are full of this spiritual life. All you can do is to share. You don't need to fill any void. The problem is that we are not aware of that fullness. We are aware of our personality, which is intrinsically incomplete, and then we try to fill it up with external things, whether material possessions or love or knowledge, or you may start developing virtues because you want to feel wise or skillful or great, that you are on the path, a spiritual person. So all those aims are better than just a materialistic aim, but you are still doing it for yourself. So at some point, if we want to continue to grow, we need to purify that from the self, from the ego that is seeking. And that's what she said. When the desire has lost the tinge of the separate I, then it is pure. Now, this is a process. You can't just will yourself into not being selfish. This is a gradual process. We need to realize more and more our connection with everything. We need to start perceiving more of our inner self. And many times all this happens unconsciously. I'm not talking about having visions or as we grow spiritually, all this naturally happens. We may not even notice it, but it is happening. And eventually your main driving force is to address not my suffering, but to address suffering for everybody. You are addressing, Blavatsky was saying, the desire for the abstract. You are addressing suffering, not applied to you or to him or to her, but suffering in the abstract, in the sense of, in the universal way. And of course, that also will help you with your own suffering, but your focus is the suffering that we humanity go through, or any other subject. That's, I think, what she was saying.
Did you address love?
Yeah. I just mentioned.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
It did.
Anything else? Any comment?
I think you did a really good job of completing the theosophical circle of concepts. I mean, some of them I've come in contact with individually, but you really you created a connection that helps one pursue a life of purpose on this planet.
Yeah, that's more or less what I try to do. As I was saying at the beginning, all this and much more is in the literature. Sometimes it's interesting to bring and give it some structure so that we can see the overall intention behind. That's basically what I did. As Blavatsky said, when she wrote The Secret Doctrine, of course, that's nothing like what I did here. I'm not comparing that. But she said, what I'm offering here, I'm offering like roses, a bouquet of roses, but the roses are not mine. The only thing that is mine is like the lace.
It's called a bouquet. And the only thing that is mine is the string that holds it together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was good.
So that's what I did.
Yeah, that's
I
good.
pulled the string that hold together.
All these
Stitches.
ideas, yeah. Good. Mhm.
And I think that's part of what we as members can do in different fields that we are interested.
I really appreciated your comments about meditation. It really helped a lot. Go back and read that again
Yeah.
because it explains a lot. Because I have some friends that are meditators, but boy, are they controlling. And a few years back I did a heart-centered meditation with someone who, and I found that to be very helpful. And anyway, we really touched on some really important points about how to, because of course the key thing is for me to get closer to focusing and functioning the way I'm supposed to be in a more ideal sense, and it's not for relaxation or being able to then go out into the tough world and make it and be, with a sword or something like that, because I can go back to meditation when I get home.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I found that really helpful.
That's important. Yes, those are, whenever something becomes massive, it tends to lose the depth.
Right.
In anything. I mean, I'm not an expert in music, so the music that I consume is probably like fast food for the real musician. We can't expect that everybody can appreciate the depth of all fields. With spirituality, it's the same. So it's good that people are beginning to meditate, but that kind of approach is not necessarily going to produce a spiritual development. Eventually, maybe later in this lifetime, maybe in the next one, but I just wrote an article about that, looking at several points that I think are a problem in the modern approach to meditation that is published this month in the Theosophies. It's called The Nature of Theosophical Meditation. And that's available online. Maybe once it is out, we can send a link to the lodge and you can post it. There are several points, but what you are saying, there are many people who are meditating, but because the motivation, because the worldview, because the practice that they are doing, it's not going to result necessarily in a spiritual development. It's still around the personality. And if a person is mature, like I think it was Emerson, that he would just sit and repeat his name. He had mystical experiences. So if you are mature, anything will work. But there are certain things that are very helpful if we can go in the right direction for this stuff.
We used to have a teacher, Harry Van Gelder. He was great, but he taught us in terms of meditation not to meditate on maybe the heart chakra or whatever. Told us to meditate up here because he said there was another field up here that needed to help help us connect all the fields together.
Yeah, there are three centers.
Mhm.
And Blavatsky talks about that. There is the center of the brain that is connected to the crown chakra.
Right.
There is the center of the heart. There is the center of the navel.
Mhm.
Now, Blavatsky said the navel is a center that was used in the previous civilization, the Atlantean civilization. That center we should not use, even though many traditions are using that center. She says that that center is connected now to the lower emotions and all that. Yeah. Then there is the heart that is connected to buddhi, and that's one of the centers. Or the brain, especially in the third ventricle between the pineal and pituitary gland and connected to the crown chakra, that's connected to higher minds. And some people feel more related to the center in the brain, some others in the heart. Jeffrey Hodgson, that was an important theosophist, he also would recommend to meditate in the center. Blavatsky talked about all of them, but the heart center is a very safe center that can be taught to anybody, and it's not the heart chakra; it's the heart center. It's a different thing. The centers in the brain, if you focus in the wrong way in the pituitary pineal gland, that can produce some problems. So if you have a living person there that knows about this, like in the case of Harry, then that may be safer to teach. But in general, the heart center is one of the safest centers to practice.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right.
with that,
Okay.
I'm going to end the
Thank you,
meeting
everyone.
or end the
Thank you.
recording. Thank you all who showed up online.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Oh,